The night Emily Parker realized something was missing came without warning. Rain tapped softly against her apartment window. Traffic hummed below, and the city of Portland moved on as usual. Everything looked normal. Everything felt quiet. Yet, inside her chest, there was a hollow space that refused to stay silent. Emily stood by the window with a mug of tea she had already forgotten to drink. She was 32, steady in her life, careful with her choices. She had built her days brick by brickwork, rest, repeatant, till nothing could easily fall apart. That was the plan, at least. Still, when the lights went out and the world slowed down, she felt unfinished. Like a sentence that never reached its final word. The next morning, she arrived at work early, hoping motion would push the feeling away. The design firm buzzed with its usual low-energy keyboards clicking, printers humming, polite greetings floating through the air. Emily liked it this way, predictable, safe. That was when she saw him. Daniel Brooks stood near the conference room, holding a folder, listening more than speaking. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't interrupt or rush. He just paid attention as if every word mattered. When someone laughed, he smiled softly, not loudly. When someone spoke, he looked at them fully. Emily noticed him without meaning to. Their eyes met briefly. Daniel nodded once, a simple greeting, and looked away. Should have ended there. Instead, something settled quietly in her mind. Refusing to leave, later that day, their manager introduced Daniel as the newest team member. He had transferred from Seattle, bringing experience and calm confidence with him. Emily listened from her desk, pretending to focus on her screen, but her attention kept drifting back to him. During lunch, the break room filled quickly. Emily usually ate alone, but every seat was taken. Daniel looked up from his coffee. "You can sit here," he said, moving his chair slightly. She hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks." They ate in comfortable silence at first. No pressure, no forced talk. It felt natural, which surprised her. After a few minutes, Daniel spoke. "So, how long have you worked here?" "Almost 5 years," Emily replied. "Longer than I planned." He smiled. "Funny how that happens?" She laughed quietly. The sound felt rare, even to her. As the days passed, small moments grew into something steady. A shared joke during meetings. A short walk after work. Conversations that stayed light but honest. Daniel never pushed. He never asked questions that felt too close. Yet somehow he learned her anyway. Emily found herself opening up without noticing when it began. She told him about her love for quiet. Mornings, about the way she used to draw as a child, about how she once believed love was meant to arrive loudly and all at once. Daniel listened. Always, one afternoon. As they walked along the river after work, Daniel spoke about his past. He talked about moving often, about relationships that ended not with anger, but with silence. He spoke plainly, without bitterness. "I think people don't always leave because they stop caring," he said. "Sometimes they leave because they're afraid of how much they do." Emily felt the words land deeper than expected. She wanted to say something, to admit that fear had shaped many of her choices. That she had learned how to protect herself so well that even happiness struggled to reach her. Instead, she said that, "Make sense?" Daniel glanced at her as if he could hear what she hadn't said. He didn't press. He never did. That night, Emily lay awake longer than usual. Her thoughts returned to Daniel's voice, calm and steady. She wondered when his presence had started to feel familiar. Like something she hadn't known she was missing. She reminded herself to be careful. Emotional closeness had cost her before. Years ago, she had trusted someone fully, only to be left with promises that faded without explanation. She had survived by closing doors and telling herself she was better off alone. Yet Daniel felt different. Not exciting in a dangerous way, not intense or dramatic, it's just real. That scared her most of all. The next week, the firm worked late on a deadline. The office grew quiet as people left one by one. Emily and Daniel stayed behind, focused on their screens. When the clock passed 9, Daniel stood and stretched. Coffee. He asked Jot. She nodded, surprised at how relieved she felt. They sat by the window, city lights glowing below. Daniel spoke softly, as if not to disturb the moment. "You don't talk much about yourself," he said. Emily smiled slightly. "I'm not very interesting." "I don't think that's true," he replied. She met his gaze, and for a second felt seen in a way that reached past words. Her chest tightened. She looked away. "I just don't like expectations," she said. "They make things heavy." Daniel considered this. "Sometimes expectations come from hope," he said. "Not pressure." Emily didn't answer. Hope was something she had learned to keep at a distance. When they finally left the office, the air was cool and quiet. At her car, Daniel paused. "I enjoy spending time with you," he said simply. Emily's heart beat faster. "Me too." He smiled, gentle and sincere, then stepped back. Giving her space as she drove home, Emily realized something had shifted. The empty space inside her hadn't disappeared, but it felt different, less silent, more awake. She didn't know it yet, but that space had just begun to open, and once opened, it would never feel the same again. Emily did not notice when Daniel became part of her daily rhythm. It happened quietly, like a song playing in the background that slowly becomes impossible to ignore. Their conversations grew longer, their walks more frequent, their silence more comfortable. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Yet something meaningful was forming between them. They began taking lunch breaks together by the river. The water moved steadily, carrying reflections of the sky, while their words flowed just as easily. Daniel spoke about his childhood in Ohio, about moving cities and learning how to start over without losing himself. Emily listened closely, surprised by how much she cared about every detail in return. She shared pieces of her life she usually kept guarded. She talked about her parents' quiet marriage, about learning independence early, about the belief that needing someone was a weakness. Daniel never argued. He just listened as if her thoughts mattered exactly as they were. One evening, they attended a small office gathering. Music played softly, people laughed, but Emily found herself focused on Daniel alone. He stood nearby, not touching her, yet always aware of where she was. When their eyes met across the room, the world seemed to slow. Emily felt something unfamiliar. Not excitement that burned too fast, but warmth that stayed. It made her nervous. After the gathering, they walked together under streetlights, glowing like quiet witnesses. Daniel spoke first. "Do you ever feel like you hold back, even when you want to step forward?" Emily stopped walking. The question struck too close to the truth. "Yes," she admitted. "Because when you step forward, you can fall." Daniel nodded. "That's true. But standing still can feel lonely too." The honesty between them hung in the air. Emily wanted to say more, but fear pressed against her chest. She smiled and changed the subject. Daniel noticed but didn't push. His patience both comforted and unsettled her. Days turned into weeks. They messaged each other in the evenings, not constantly, but meaningfully. Daniel sent her photos of places he discovered around the city. Emily shared small victories from her work, things she rarely celebrated aloud. She began to look forward to those messages more than she wanted to admit. One night, unable to sleep, Emily sat on her couch staring at her phone. She thought about Daniel's steady presence, about how he never demanded more than she could give. It made her wonder what it would be like to stop guarding her heart so closely. The thought scared her enough to set the phone down. The next day, Daniel invited her to a weekend art exhibit. Emily hesitated. It felt like a step she hadn't prepared for. Still, she agreed. They walked through the gallery slowly, commenting on the paintings. Daniel noticed details Emily had missed. Emily noticed how his face softened when he spoke about art. It felt intimate without crossing any lines. At one painting, Daniel paused. It showed two figures standing close but not touching. Sometimes distance says more than closeness. He said. Emily swallowed. Or it can hide what we're afraid to say. Daniel looked at her then, really looked at her. For a moment, she thought he might speak the truth. Both of them were circling. Instead, he smiled gently. You're thoughtful, he said. I like that about you. Her heart beat faster. She smiled back, unsure how to respond. That evening, as they sat on a bench outside, Emily felt a strong urge to lean closer. She didn't. Old habits held her in place. Daniel sensed the shift. He stood and said, I should head home. She felt disappointed but also relieved. Safety had won again. Later that night, Emily replayed the day in her mind. The laughter, the shared glances, the quiet understanding. She realized something important. Daniel wasn't trying to fill her life with noise. He was filling it with presence, and that made her question the walls she had built. A few days later, Emily received a message from an old friend who reminded her of the pain she once endured. The memory reopened wounds she thought had healed. That evening, when Daniel asked if she wanted to talk, she almost said no. Instead, she said yes. They met at a small cafe. Emily spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. She told him about the relationship that had ended suddenly years ago, about trusting fully and being left without explanation. Daniel listened, its expression steady. I learned how to be okay on my own, Emily said. Maybe too okay? Daniel nodded. Surviving teaches us a lot, but it shouldn't cost us connection. His words stayed with her long after they parted. From that night on, Emily felt herself leaning in emotionally, even as fear whispered warnings. She noticed how Daniel remembered small things she mentioned, how he gave her space when she needed it, how he never made her feel small for being careful. Still, uncertainty remained. One afternoon, while walking by the river, Emily felt a sudden urge to ask the question she'd been avoiding. Daniel, she said, stopping. What are you looking for? He didn't answer right away. He watched the water move, then turned to her. Something real, he said. Something honest. Even if it's slow. Emily felt both comforted and afraid, because she wanted the same thing more than she was ready to admit. As they stood there, the distance between them felt smaller than ever, yet still unclosed. And Emily knew that whatever came next would require a choice she could no longer delay. The change came quietly, but its weight was heavy. Daniel told Emily on a Tuesday afternoon. Between meetings, with a calm voice that did not match the storm the words created. A long-term project. Vancouver. At least a year. Maybe more. Emily smiled first. She congratulated him. She said all the right things. But inside, something folded in on itself. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Screens glowed. Voices echoed. Emily nodded when needed and spoke when spoken to. But her mind stayed fixed on one thought. This is ending before it even begins. Daniel did not act differently. He still walked with her at lunch. Still asked about her day. Still listened. That almost made it worse. Emily began pulling back without meaning to. Her messages grew shorter. Her answers became careful. When Daniel noticed, he didn't confront her. He gave her space, even though it clearly cost him, one evening. As they walked by the river, the silence stretched longer than usual. You feel far away, Daniel said gently. Emily stopped. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to say everything she felt. Instead, fear took control. I just don't want to get used to something that won't last, she said. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand. But distance doesn't erase what's real. Emily looked away. Real was exactly what scared her. Days passed quickly after that. Daniel's move became a known fact at the office. Farewell lunches were planned. People joked about visits and video calls. Emily smiled through all of it, but each laugh felt heavy. She told herself she was being practical. She had learned the cost of hope before. Loving someone who could leave felt like walking into pain with open eyes, so she chose distance. The night before, Daniel's last day, Emily barely slept. Memories of their quiet moments replayed in her mind. The way he listened. The way he made her feel steady without trying. She wondered if this was what she would always do, walk away before someone else could. At the office the next morning. Daniel looked tired but calm. When he saw her, he smiled, warm and familiar. That smile almost broke her resolve. "Coffee? Later," he asked. She nodded. They met at a small cafe near the office. Rain streaked the windows. The place was nearly empty. For a while, neither spoke. Daniel finally broke the silence. "I don't regret meeting you," he said, "no matter what happens next." Emily felt her throat tighten. She stared into her cup, afraid that if she looked at him, she would lose control. "I don't either," she said softly. Daniel took a breath. "There are things I haven't said, not because I'm unsure, but because I wanted to respect your pace." Emily's heart raced. This was the moment she had both feared and wanted. "I care about you," Daniel continued, "deeply, and I need you to know that before I leave." The cafe felt suddenly too small. Emily's mind filled with memories of loss, of promises that once sounded just as sincere. She stood up before she could think. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said. Her voice controlled but distant. Daniel looked at her, pain clear in his eyes. "I think I already did." Those words stayed between them, heavy and unfinished. They walked back to the office together. At the door, Daniel stopped. "I won't push," he said, "but I won't pretend this didn't matter." Emily nodded, unable to speak. The rest of the day passed slowly. When it was time for Daniel to leave, people gathered to say goodbye. Hugs were shared. Promises were made. Emily stood at a distance, watching. When their eyes met across the room, Daniel gave her a small smile. Not hopeful, not angry, just honest. Then he was gone. The following Timmy returned home that evening to a silence that felt louder than ever. She sat on her couch, staring at the empty space beside her. Realizing how used she had become to his presence, she told herself she had done the right thing. Protected herself, avoided pain, yet the emptiness felt deeper now, sharper. Over the next weeks, she avoided thinking about Daniel, but reminders appeared everywhere. A cafe they once visited, a message thread she refused to open, a song that played during one of their walks. She learned that distance did not dull feeling. It clarified it. One night, unable to ignore it any longer, Emily admitted the truth she had been avoiding. She hadn't lost Daniel to distance. She had walked away, and that realization hurt more than any goodbye ever had. The space inside her, once quiet, now echoed. And for the first time, Emily wondered if protecting her heart had cost her something she might never replace. Months passed. Life returned to its usual rhythm, but the emptiness Emily felt didn't fade. Workdays were full, friends checked in, weekends were busy, but the quiet space inside her remained, louder than ever. She kept herself occupied, telling herself she was fine. Yet every night, when the lights dimmed and the city slowed, her thoughts returned to Daniel. Then one evening, a message appeared in her inbox. From Daniel. Emily had ignored it for weeks, afraid of what opening it might do. But something inside nudged her to finally read it. He wrote about Vancouver, the rain, the quiet streets, the small cafes he had discovered. Every line reminded her of their walks, their conversations, the way he had listened without judgment. He didn't demand anything. He didn't ask for her presence. He just shared pieces of his life, and in doing so, reminded her of hers. There was one line that hit her hardest. "Meeting you filled a part of me I didn't know was empty. I hope you found the same." Emily stared at the words. Her chest tightened, and tears blurred her vision. She realized she had been running from the very thing she wanted the most: connection. Not just any connection, but the kind that completes you quietly, deeply, without overwhelming you. The next day, Emily booked a flight. It was sudden, but her heart knew it was right. She didn't think about fear, about what-ifs, or about the distance that had kept them apart. She thought only of the spaces Daniel had filled with kindness, patience, and understanding. and how she could no longer ignore what her heart had been whispering for months. Arriving at the airport, Emily's nerves raced. She scanned the crowd until she saw him, Daniel, waiting near the exit, looking around as if expecting her. When their eyes met, surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by a gentle, knowing smile. The air between them felt alive, charged with the months they had lost and the months they could still have. Neither spoke at first. There was no rush, no dramatic confession. Just presence. Emily walked toward him, and he stepped slightly forward, closing the distance without a word. The world outside the terminal seemed to pause. "I was wrong to believe emptiness protects us," Emily said quietly, finally meeting his eyes. "You didn't take anything from me, you filled me completely." Daniel's smile widened, emotion shining clearly in his eyes. "And you filled me too," he replied. They stood there for a long moment, taking in the feeling of being together again. Not hurried, not desperate, but whole in a way Emily hadn't experienced before. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic words. It was about the calm certainty of two people who had found understanding, trust, and connection in each other. Over the following days, they explored the city together, sharing coffee in quiet cafes, walking along the waterfront, and talking late into the evening. Everything felt familiar yet new, like returning to a home you had never fully known you missed. Emily realized that love could be gentle and patient. It didn't need fireworks or chaos to be meaningful. It was about moments that filled you quietly, deeply, in ways that made your life feel complete. At night, as they sat together in his apartment, Emily watched Daniel laugh at a small joke she made. The warmth in her chest spread through her whole body. She understood now that being filled didn't mean perfection or constant happiness. It meant connection, presence, understanding. It meant allowing someone to matter fully and honestly, without fear. Emily no longer feared loss. She had learned that some connections were worth taking the risk for. That stepping forward was sometimes the only way to heal what had been empty for too long. In Daniel's presence, she found courage, comfort, and the kind of peace that comes from being truly seen. The emptiness that had haunted her months ago had vanished, replaced by something stronger and steadier. Emily finally understood what it meant to be complete, not because her life was perfect, but because someone had shown her how to let herself feel fully again. And in that quiet, unassuming way, she realized that sometimes love doesn't overwhelm you. Sometimes it simply fills you gently, completely, and in a way that changes everything forever. For Emily and Daniel, the journey wasn't over. But now it was theirs to share, unguarded, open, and full of the promise that comes when two hearts find a place where they belong. No words were needed beyond the soft smiles and steady presence. They had found what they were looking for, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt whole.